Today we're going to be talking about the difference between present perfect, past perfect, and future perfect verb tenses. Remember that verbs are words that describe an action, occurrence, or state of being. The tense of a verb refers to the time of the action or state of being. The perfect form is the verb tense used to talk about a completed action or condition and always uses a form of have or had, plus the past participle. Participles are words made out of verbs but used as adjectives. In English, participles are also sometimes used to form compound words like is, going. A past participle, in the context we're using it today, is the second part of a compound verb that's used to form perfect and passive tenses. Past participles usually ends in an ed. Verbs can appear in any one of three perfect tenses: present perfect, past perfect, and future perfect. Let's start by talking about present perfect verbs. The present perfect tense expresses an action that began in the past and is now completed in the present. Take a look at this equation. Present tense of have plus past participle equals present perfect tense. We can put those elements into practice in the following sentence. I have finished my homework already. We know this sentence is written in the perfect tense for two reasons. First, we see that it is talking about a completed action. I have finished my homework. There's our ed past participle, and it's telling us the job is completed. The second hint we have that it's the perfect tense is the word have. Remember, the perfect form is a verb tense that uses a form of have or had plus a past participle. In this sentence, have finished tells us that the finishing action began in the past but is now completed in the present. We can see that the sentence used have instead of had, so we know it's present perfect tense, not past perfect. The past perfect tense expresses an action that began in the past and was completed in the past before something else occurred. The past perfect equation looks like this. Past tense of had plus past participle equals past perfect tense. Here's a sentence with past perfect tense. Paul tried to hide the vase because he had broken it. Right away, our eyes should be drawn to the past perfect phrase, had broken. There's our past tense had and our past participle. You may notice that broken is not an ed verb, but it's still a past participle. It just conjugates differently than the ed verbs we've looked at so far. This also happens with words like ate and shaken. This sentence is describing something that began in the past and was completed before something else occurred. Paul broke the vase. This action is complete, therefore the tense is perfect and it happened in the past. Therefore, the word had appears in our equation. The future perfect tense expresses an action that will be completed at some specified point in the future. This equation is a little more exciting. Will or shall plus have plus past participle equals future perfect tense. Here's a sentence with future perfect tense. Do you think the lunchroom will have cooked enough rice? First, we notice the two elements we've learned to expect from the perfect tense: a version of have or had and a past participle, in this case the ed verb, cooked. You might be tempted to think that this was present perfect tense based on our earlier equation, but be careful to look first in front of the word have to make sure it's not future perfect. Sure enough, the entirety of the phrase reads will have cooked. This tells us that we're talking about an action that's not done yet, but will be done in the future at a specific time. Take, for example, the following phrases. By the end of the night, Mary will have danced for 3 hours. And in 2 years, I will have saved $2,000. In both of these examples, the reader is standing in the present without evidence of a completed action, but we can be sure that both of those things will be done in the future. thus the past participles danced and saved. It may sound complicated, but if you remember these 3 grammar equations and acquaint yourself with common past participles, you'll have a solid understanding of present perfect, past perfect, and future perfect tenses. Words are divided into different categories depending on their use and function. These categories are what we like to call the parts of speech. There are 8 parts of speech in the English language: nouns, pronouns, verbs, adverbs, adjectives, conjunctions, prepositions, and interjections. Today, we'll actually be talking about gerunds, participles, and infinitives. Now, you're probably wondering how those are related to the parts of speech, right? Well, for the sake of understanding these concepts, just think of those 3 as various ways in which the different parts of speech can be used. In other words, the main parts of speech are your tools, and our 3 topics for today are the projects you need the tools for. A gerund is a word that is created with a verb but functions as a noun, always ending in ing. Being used as a noun, a gerund can function as a subject complement, a direct object, an indirect object, or an object of a preposition. It's important to note that though gerunds may look a lot like present participles, they are not the same thing. Gerunds are specifically placed in the noun position of a sentence, whereas present participles are placed with the verb phrase, usually as modifiers. Here is an example of a gerund in the subject position. Brushing your hair prevents it from tangling. In this sentence, the word brushing is the gerund functioning as the subject of the sentence. If a gerund were to be the complement of a subject in a sentence, it would look like this. Her number 1 priority is working. Working is functioning as a complement to the subject, priority. Here's an example where the gerund is the object of a preposition. There is no use in standing in the line for 3 hours, Grandma said. In this sentence, standing follows the preposition in, making it the object of the preposition. Gerunds can also function as the object of a sentence. Very similar to gerunds are participles. Participles are words created from verbs that are then used as adjectives to modify nouns in a sentence. They can also be used as introductions to adverbial phrases. There are present and past participles. Present participles always end in ing and correlate to events taking place in the current tense. The past participle can be either regular or irregular and refers to events that have already happened. Differentiating between participles and gerunds can be a little tricky sometimes because participles can actually function as gerunds. For our purposes today, we're going to take a look at some rather straightforward examples. When using a participle as an adjective, you might come across a sentence like this. The browning fruit should be put outside for composting. Browning is a present participle, noted by the ing ending, that is modifying the noun fruit. I spent the whole day studying math. In this sentence, studying is a present participle that is working as the beginning of an adverbial phrase in the sentence. The phrase studying math is modifying the verb spent. How did I spend the whole day? Studying math. Both of those examples were present participles, meaning the words ended in ing to denote something happening in the current time. As mentioned, there are such things as past participles. Past participles can have varied word endings depending on the word being used. Most commonly, you will see d or ed added to the end of a word. Let's look at a couple of examples. The windows were cracked when the rainstorm came through. Here, the word cracked is the past participle working as an adjective to modify the noun windows. He continued forward, cautioned by the desolate streets. Cautioned is the past participle in this sentence, functioning as the beginning of an adverbial phrase describing the word continued. Additionally, participles can also appear as multi-part verbs. The multi comes from attaching an auxiliary verb or helping verb to the main verb being used in the sentence. Joanne was baking fresh cookies for her grandkids. In this sentence, only one helping verb is used, was. It is paired with the participle baking to create a multi-part verb. Joanne has been baking all morning. The helping verb in the sentence has been participle baking. Joanne would have been reading all morning if her grandkids hadn't said they were coming over. Helping verb would have been participle reading. Knowing how to form different endings of the participles allows for a variety of meanings to be conveyed. Unlike gerunds and participles, infinitives do not change their endings. They are always in the simple singular form. Infinitives are singular verbs usually preceded by the word to. They do not have any specific suffixes, they're just simple in nature. In other words, the verbs are unconjugated. Infinitives can be used as a noun, an adjective, or an adverb. Most likely, when you're dealing with infinitives, you'll be dealing with the present infinitive. That's what we'll be looking at today. The to is used with the infinitive to show the purpose of something or maybe to express someone's opinion. Let's take a look at some examples of infinitives. Noun, Josh wants to study as soon as he gets home from school. Adjective, today she wants to show Josh a new game to play. Adverb, Josh played the new game with his sister instead of studying, to make her happy. We've discussed quite a bit today. Remember, gerunds are words that are formed from verbs and used as nouns, always ending in ing. Participles are words created from verbs that can be used as adjectives or an adverbial phrase, also ending in ing, unless expressing past tense. And infinitives are verbs that take the simple tense and follow the preposition to. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. This silly sentence contains all of the letters of the alphabet, and you might notice it also is stuffed full of adjectives. In this video, we'll talk about what adjectives are and how to use them in a sentence. An adjective is a word that describes a noun. It describes something's size, color, age, origin, material, or shape. Adjectives can be used to make the subject simpler to understand and to shed light on what an author wants their ideas to truly convey. The adjectives used in the sentence about the fox and the dog are quick and brown, describing the fox, and lazy, which describes the dog. Here's another example. She is the smartest student in the class. Student is the noun, and smartest is describing what kind of student she is. So smartest is the adjective. Shakespeare has been credited for adding hundreds of new words to the English language when he was writing, and many of those were adjectives. Some examples of Shakespearean adjectives are, thou cold-blooded slave, hast thou not spoke like thunder on my side, been sworn my soldier, bidding me depend upon thy stars, thy fortune and thy strength, and dost thou now fall over to my fours? Cold-blooded is an adjective that describes the slave. It helps us to know what type of person the slave was. Cold-blooded is a word that had been used to describe snakes and reptiles, but Shakespeare used it for the first time to describe a person. Here's an example from the book Little Women. She remembered her mother's promise and, slipping her hand under her pillow, drew out a little crimson-covered book. Crimson-covered describes the color of fabric that was covering the book. As you can see, using adjectives can make your sentences and ideas come to life. Instead of just saying that the firework display was beautiful, you can make it much more exciting and easier to envision what the fireworks actually looked like by saying, the fireworks this year were bursting brightly overhead as the bright, dazzling sparkles lit up the sky. Bright and dazzling are just two of the many, many adjectives that make writing so descriptive. 'descriptive' and 'fun' to read. 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 'descrip
Describing situations in detail helps readers more vividly understand what is taking place. When describing things in more detail, adverbs are a helpful addition to make your sentences more colorful and portray the event clearly. In this video, we'll take a look at what adverbs do, how to identify them, and how to best use them in our writing. Let's get started. The easiest way to find an adverb in a sentence is to ask these questions. Where was something done? When was it done? How was it done? And to what extent was it done? An adverb will always answer one of those questions. For example, the adverb here answers the question, where? And the adverb randomly answers the question, how? An easy identifier for adverbs is the suffix ly. Not all adverbs use it, but the majority of adverbs do. Let's identify some adverbs by using our 4 questions. She went outside and walked the dog. Do any of those words in the sentence answer the question where, when, how, or to what extent? In this example, we see that outside is the adverb because it tells us where she went. Let's look at another. They briskly jogged through the park. Here, we see that the word briskly answers the question how something was done, making it the adverb in the sentence. Let's try one more example. She almost tripped while jogging, but regained her balance. This one might be tricky. In this example, we see that almost describes the extent to which something happens, which in this case was tripped. She almost tripped, making almost the adverb here. Adverbs not only modify verbs, they are also used to describe comparisons of 2 things. Adverbs have 3 degrees of comparison: positive, comparative, and superlative. The best way to explain positive, comparative, and superlative adverbs is to think of them as well, better, and best. When we want to describe the quality of something, we can say the thing itself is done well. That would be a positive adverb. We may compare that thing to something else and say, this thing is better than something else, which is known as a comparative adverb. Or we may simply say, this thing is the best, which is superlative. As you can see, with each comparison, the degree of its descriptor is increased. There are many ways of changing adverbs from positive to comparative and superlative. Let's go over each one with real examples and see how they differ. What's important to note about positive adverbs is that the words used don't necessarily have to be positive or good words. For example, the word badly is a positive adverb because it is the first or basic degree you can use to describe something without comparing it to anything else. Many adverbs can be modified to show different degrees by simply adding er or est to the end of the word. Adding er to a word makes it comparative, meaning it's not the most of something, but it is more than something else. Adding est to the end of a word means that the word it is describing is the most of something, and nothing can be compared as being better than it. Here's an example. He ran through the field faster than his sister. In this example, the adverb faster responds to the question of how something was done. We also know this is a comparative adverb because of the added er to the end of fast. This lets us know that this person ran at a higher speed compared to his sister. Here's another example. She was the quickest of everyone who ran the 5K. Here we see the adverb quickest answers the question of how something was done. Because there is an est at the end of quick, we know that this adverb is superlative because no one else ran more quickly than this person. Some adverbs, especially those that end in ly, can't have their degrees increased to comparative or superlative forms by simply adding er or est to the end. These adverbs must have more and most preceding the word to be modified. Let's look at a few examples. The crowd cheered for her more joyfully than for the other performers. Here we can see that joyfully is the adverb because it answers the question of how the crowd cheered. We can also see that joyfully is a comparative adverb because of the word more before it. With this, we know that the crowd cheered more, but not the most joyfully. He completed his task most efficiently of all the employees. Again, in this example, the adverb efficiently is easy to spot, not only because it ends in ly, but because it answers the question of how the task was performed. We also find the word most preceding efficiently, which means this is a superlative adverb and no task was completed more efficiently than his. Some adverbs can't be made comparative and superlative with the use of er, est, more, or most. For irregular adverbs, changing their degree of comparison means changing the word and its spelling entirely. There is no special trick to these irregular adverbs, so they must be memorized over time to understand their implied degree of comparison. The word badly is an example of an irregular adverb. To make it comparative, you wouldn't say more badly or badlier. The comparative form of badly is worse, and the superlative form is worst. Other examples of irregular adverbs include little, which becomes less and least, and good, which becomes better and best. Now, let's look at adverbial phrases. Adverbial phrases perform the same function as adverbs and describe when, how, to what extent, and where something happens. What makes them different from normal adverbs is they are phrases, which means they are a group of two or more words and they don't always contain a typical ly adverb in the phrase. Here are some examples that answer the question, when? He goes camping every summer. They are going to sleep earlier than usual. Here, these highlighted phrases signify a time in which something occurs. In this sentence, he was driving haphazardly and recklessly. This adverbial phrase is made up of two adverbs and a conjunction to make a phrase that describes how something occurred. An adverbial clause is similar to an adverbial phrase. However, adverbial clauses, just like the name suggests, are clauses, which means they contain a subject, verb, and subordinating conjunction. Let's look at some examples. Sit at the table until your food is eaten. In this example, the adverbial clause, until your food is eaten, describes when something occurs. We also know it is a clause because it has a subject, food, and verb, eaten, as well as a subordinating conjunction, until. My sister, although she was hungry, wouldn't eat until I arrived. Here, the adverbial clause starts with a subordinating conjunction, although has a subject, she, and a verb, is. Together, they describe the extent to which the sister wouldn't eat. Make sure you are polite to people wherever you go. This example shows the subordinating conjunction wherever, the subject you, and verb go to show when something happened. Before we go, let's do a little practice to refresh what we've learned. Number 1, which of the following are not adverbs? A, entirely, B, rather, C, them, or D, cautiously. The answer is C, them. The word them is a pronoun. Number 2, the highlighted word is an example of what? Some people agree that Serena Williams is the greatest athlete of all time. A, adverbial phrase. B, subordinating conjunction. C, comparative adverb. Or D, superlative adverb. The answer is D, superlative.
Prepositions are words that specify how something is related to something else in time and space. They work in a sentence to connect nouns or pronouns with other words and elements. Let's start with this example. The dog swam in the lake. There are two nouns in this sentence, dog and lake. We know from the verb swam what the dog is doing, but we need the preposition in to tell us where the swimming is happening. The dog is swimming in something, and that something is the lake. The second noun connected with the preposition, in this case the word lake, is called the object of the preposition, and together with the preposition forms a prepositional phrase. There is no subject in the phrase in the lake, only a noun. Because of the preposition in, we know it's a prepositional phrase. This is an article, not a noun, so we know it can't be the object of the preposition. Lake, the noun we are trying to connect with our first noun, dog, is the object of the preposition. Most of the time, though, not always, the object of the preposition comes after the preposition in the prepositional phrase. When we're trying to find the prepositional phrase in a sentence, first try to spot the preposition. Prepositions show direction, location, or time. Many of the most common prepositions are small words you use every day. At, by, for, from, in, of, on, to, and with are all prepositions. Think about this sentence and try to pick out the prepositional phrase. After work, Joe drove to the store in his car. There are three prepositional phrases in this sentence. Let's start with a simple one. Joe, the proper noun, is connected to the noun store by the preposition to. It answers a directional question. Where did Joe go? He went to the store. The word store is the object of the prepositional phrase to the store. Let's look for another preposition in this sentence. You might have noticed our preposition in appeared again in this sentence. In isn't a directional preposition like to, but it tells us where Joe was during his drive. He was in his car. Car is the object of the preposition in, and in his car is the prepositional phrase. Now, let's look back to the first word in the sentence, after. This is also a preposition. Remember, prepositions show direction, location, or time. After dinner is a prepositional phrase that tells us when Joe went to the store. Dinner is the object of the preposition. Not all prepositional phrases are quite so simple. Think of it like a sandwich. You have to have bread and filling to make a sandwich, right? A sandwich can be as simple as cheese between two slices of bread, but it can also have meat, veggies, and spreads. We can jazz up prepositional phrases the same way with adjectives and adverbs. As long as you still have the bread and the filling, preposition and object of the preposition, you'll still have a prepositional phrase. Take this sentence, for example. The swallows flew over the trees near the lake. Over the trees and near the lake are the two prepositional phrases in this sentence. Over is a preposition that tells us the direction the swallows flew, and near is a preposition that tells us where the trees were located. These prepositional phrases are fairly simple, but look what happens if we make the sandwich more interesting. The swallows flew over the dark trees near the town's renowned lake. We still have the same two prepositions and prepositional phrases, but the words dark, towns, and renowned are all adjectives. Dark is modifying or adding meaning to the object, trees, of the first prepositional phrase, but it is otherwise not changing the preposition in any way. The same is true of towns and renowned. They are modifying the object of the preposition lake. In the second phrase, near is still the preposition and lake is still the object of the preposition. So let's recap. A preposition is a word that answers the question when or where something happened in a sentence. It connects nouns or pronouns to other nouns in the sentence. About, to, with, up, down, under, inside, after, before, and for are a few examples of common prepositions. The object of the preposition is the noun that the preposition is talking about, and together with the preposition, those objects make prepositional phrases.
Hey guys, welcome to this video on sentence structure. In this video, we'll learn about the different types of sentences so you can make sure your writing is interesting and engaging to the reader. Listen to this paragraph. Daniel went to the grocery store. He wasn't sure if it had any more fresh apples. The store did not have any apples. Daniel was very sad. Apples are Daniel's favorite food. How did this paragraph sound to you? Monotonous, boring, and uninteresting, right? How about this version? Daniel went to the grocery store, but he wasn't sure if it had any more fresh apples. Much to his dismay, the store did not have any apples, and Daniel was distraught. After all, apples are Daniel's favorite food. Sounds a lot better, right? While there are many differences between these two paragraphs, the main difference is that the first used the same simple type of sentence throughout, while the second used many different types of sentences in order to enhance the content. The first type of sentence we're going to look at is a simple sentence, which consists of both a subject and predicate and can stand independently as its own sentence. A simple sentence is essentially the same thing as an independent clause. Let's look at an example. The old car survived the drive across the country despite the weather conditions. There's only one independent clause with the subject, the old car, and the predicate, survived the drive across the country despite the weather conditions. Let's move on to the second type of sentence, compound sentences. A compound sentence consists of two independent clauses joined together by a conjunction. Here's an example. Max drove to the store and Ben picked up the girls. Note that there are two independent clauses here that could stand alone as sentences. You could just as easily write, Max drove to the store. Ben picked up the girls. But we've joined these two independent clauses together by using the conjunction and. Another example would be, with all the heavy traffic, Josh was able to get home in time for dinner, but Ariana was stuck on the busy freeway. The first independent clause is, Josh was able to get home in time for dinner. And the second is, Ariana was stuck on the busy freeway. The two clauses are joined by the conjunction but. The beginning of the sentence, with all the heavy traffic, is a prepositional phrase and does not have any bearing on this type of sentence. The third type of sentence is a complex sentence, which consists of one independent clause with the addition of one or more dependent clauses. Let's look at an example. After she took the time to clean her room, Sarah could finally play with her new dollhouse. The first part of the sentence, after she took the time to clean her room, is a dependent clause. More information is needed for it to serve as its own independent sentence. The second part of the sentence, Sarah could finally play with her new dollhouse, is an independent clause because it has a subject and predicate and can stand alone as a sentence. The last type of sentence is a compound complex sentence. This type of sentence contains two independent clauses as well as a dependent clause. An example would look something like this. Before the treehouse is used for the first time, all the beams need to be checked and the ladder must be connected. The two independent clauses are, all the beams need to be checked and the ladder must be connected. They are combined using the conjunction and. The start of the sentence, before the treehouse is used for the first time, is a dependent clause since it has a subject, the treehouse, and a predicate, is used for the first time, but cannot stand independently as its own sentence.
When you come upon a word you don't understand while reading, you have three options. You can choose to look it up in a dictionary, ignore it, or try to figure out what it means based on the context in which it's used. If you're in a test environment, you don't usually have the luxury of a dictionary, and it certainly isn't wise to ignore the word altogether. Therefore, it's a good skill to learn how a word's context can help you better understand what the word means. Searching for a word's context is as simple as looking at other words around the troublesome word. There are, in general, 5 main types of context clues: illustrations, synonyms, contrasts, inferences, and punctuation. The first context clues fall into the category of illustrations, examples or explanations of the word. This may seem overly simple, but difficult words are often followed by information the writer uses to explain the word's meaning. Look for words like such as, including, for instance, and like. This can be the author's way of further clarifying a difficult word, and you can sometimes make a logical guess about the word's meaning from the example alone. Take a look at this sentence. An occupation such as that of a hat maker or a postman is important for anyone who wants to earn a steady wage. In this sentence, we're looking at the word occupation. Not only is it a long word that we might not understand at first, but it also has multiple meanings. An occupation can mean a job, but it can also mean to take up space. It can even be used to talk about military invasion when one country is occupying another. When we look at the sentence, though, we see 2 examples given of the word in question. Neither a hat maker or a postman are particularly prone to occupying other countries, or at least that's not their primary purpose. So we can assume that the word occupation is referencing a job or employment opportunity. A second category of context clues is synonyms. A synonym is a word that shares a near meaning with another word. For example, loud and noisy mean similar things but are 2 different words. Take a look at the following sentence to see how synonyms can be good context clues. The patient's hippocampus was an uncharted minefield. His memory was so bad, the psychiatrist wondered whether that part of the brain was even processing memory and emotion the way it should. Hippocampus is a very confusing word in this sentence. Right away, the word brain tells us that the hippocampus is likely a part of the brain. In fact, it's the part of the brain thought to be responsible for memory and emotion. The sentence says the psychiatrist was concerned the patient's memory and emotion weren't being processed the way it should be. So we can deduce that the hippocampus is responsible for those processes. The clue had both synonyms, the word brain, and a full reinstatement of the initial sentence that clarified what the hippocampus was. A third helpful context clue is the contrast or antonym clue. Antonyms are the opposite of synonyms. For example, hot and cold are antonyms. Sometimes contrast sentences can tell us what a word is not, and that in turn can give us an idea of what the word is. Look at this. Mary was known for having smooth skin, but to her horror, she woke up on her wedding day with a papule on her nose. Do you know what a papule is? Neither did I actually, but I can see the word but contrasting whatever it is with Mary's smooth skin. That, coupled with a clue about her nose, leads me to believe it is a zit of sorts, which in fact it is. A fourth clue to help you gain a bit of context surrounding words you don't understand is inference, or general context. This is a bit more vague of an explanation, but it basically means that sometimes we don't have clear synonyms or antonyms, and we don't have an illustration after the difficult word. Sometimes we just have to look at the paragraph as a whole and put a few floating parts together. This is best explained with an example. The haberdashery was Bob's favorite place. He bought all his suits there. The staff was friendly and always respectful. There's no direct description of what a haberdashery is, but the second sentence tells us that at the very least it sells suits. We also see that it's Bob's favorite place, so we can guess without certainty, but it's still a clue that it's a clothing place for men. The word staff couples with the word bought to let us know it's likely a store of some sort. The final helpful context clue is the clue of punctuation. Sometimes commas or quotation marks can be used to clarify the meaning of a word. Quotation marks can show the word has special meaning. Brackets can enclose additional explanation, and italics can further define a word. Think about the following. Matcha, Japanese green tea, has many health benefits. The parenthetical phrase gives a pretty clear description of what matcha is. In many ways, this kind of punctuation is the easiest context clue of all to deduce. These are the 5 main clues you can fall back on when trying to decipher the meaning of a difficult word. But in general, remember that when you come upon a word that isn't in your vocabulary, you don't have to give up. Paragraphs often hold together clues that can give you helpful hints about what the mystery word actually means.
Separating fact from opinion can be a difficult task. In this video, we will discuss the distinction between fact and opinion and offer some helpful tips for distinguishing between the two. A fact is a statement that can be proven to be true by the use of evidence. Factual statements are true in all cases and for all people. In other words, facts are universal. Some examples include dogs are mammals. Albany is the capital of New York. Mount Everest is the tallest mountain on Earth. Each of these statements is true. Furthermore, each statement is verifiable and not debatable, provided that definitions are agreed upon. Put simply, evidence exists that could potentially prove or disprove each claim. Opinions, unlike facts, are neither true nor false. An opinion can express a belief, attitude, value, judgment, or feeling. Some examples include, dogs are the best mammals in existence. Albany is the most interesting city in New York. World War II was a terrible war. Each of these statements expresses an opinion. Note that each is debatable. In other words, one can potentially agree or disagree with. debate, a statement of opinion. Note that the final statement, World War II was a terrible war, strikes many of us as factual. However, this is a statement of opinion. Yes, most people would consider World War II terrible. However, there is always the possibility that somebody out there holds a different opinion, as strange as they may seem. It is very rare for a statement with a value word like terrible to be factual. Now that we know the differences between a fact and an opinion, it's important to know how to distinguish between them when reading literature. Let's look at some helpful strategies. Watch for opinion masked as fact. A lot of times, professional or technical language can seem factual. In particular, you'll want to watch out for predictions. Predictions are opinions since they cannot be verified in the present. This is even true if the prediction is being expressed by an expert with an informed opinion. A zoologist who predicts that a particular animal will go extinct in 50 years, for example, is stating an informed opinion. This opinion is based on evidence, research, and expertise, but because it cannot be presently confirmed, it is not a fact. Value or judgment words often signal an opinion. LeBron James is very tall is a statement most people would agree with. However, the word very makes this problematic. What exactly does it mean to be very tall? It is not defined. What one person considers very tall, another may consider average or even short. The word very is an example of a value or judgment word. Here's a list of value and judgment words. If you see one of these in a statement, then the view being expressed is likely an opinion. Look for words like should or ought to. These words usually suggest a course of action or give advice. Though this advice may be advisable, it is rarely factual. No matter how much we agree with a should statement, it is by its very nature opinion. For instance, one should avoid smoking cigarettes may be sound advice with a lot of supporting evidence, but it is still an opinion. Smoking cigarettes can cause a variety of health ailments, on the other hand, can be verified and is therefore factual. In essence, facts can be verified by evidence, and opinions are statements of belief, attitude, value, judgment, or feeling. Before we go, let's look at a quick review question. Which of the following statements is factual? A. Ohio is a beautiful state. B. You should never drive faster than the speed limit. C. George Washington was the first president of the United States. Or D. George Washington was a great public speaker. The answer is C. This is the only option that can be backed up by evidence. Thanks for watching and happy studying.